I'm going to talk to you a bit about referencing and plagiarism now. Referencing really just means properly identifying the different bits of different books and different writers that you're using in your essay. It's about saying who are the people whose ideas you've used. Now, this is probably the area where it's going to feel to you get the most picky comments from your tutors in the marks. People will pick you up on what seems to be tiny, tiny little things. But the reason for this is that this is a really, really important thing in any academic work. It's a key skill that you need to master, and you need to really show that you're on top of it. At the most basic level, this is about treating other people fairly. It's about giving them credit for the work that they've done. And plagiarism is the thing that we're trying to avoid here. Plagiarism is kind of the cardinal sin of academic work. It's when you pass off your work, somebody else's work, as being your work. It's theft, really, because what you're doing is you're taking somebody else's ideas and pretending they're yours. And it's also deception, because you're making out, I did this, when actually you know it's somebody else. It's really important, particularly as somebody who may be training for ministry, that you get this right. Because if it looks to us like actually you're not taking those things seriously, you're not taking theft seriously, you're not taking deception seriously, then that's something that really we've got to take very seriously ourselves, because it says a lot about your character as a person. So, if getting referencing right is important, then the key thing to do to start off with is to know, how do you do it? Now, different courses will use different systems. There are several different systems of referencing out there. The important thing is to find out what's the system of referencing that's used by your course and get hold of a copy of it. Now, probably you'll find this in your course handbook. If you've got a thing on Moodle, you'll probably better go onto there and find out the information from there. Once you know that you're using the right format, what you need to do is to find out there's a kind of a fairly basic sort of system that once you've got your head round will work for most things in terms of saying, this is the book I got this from. And then you get variations depending on what sort of book it is. Is this kind of a book that's been written by somebody? Is this a book that's been written by several different people and edited together? Is this a book that's in translation? Is this something which is actually an article from a magazine? Is this something that's come from the internet? And as long as you know exactly what the source is, you will find that there's a particular variation of the format you need to put it in. And in your style guidelines, it should say that fairly clearly. It's just a case of being sure you know what it is. It may take a bit of careful thought, though, to make sure you've clearly identified that. When you're looking at something on the page, have a bit of thought about, what is this I'm actually reading? Is this actually the author giving their own opinion? Is it the author explaining somebody else's work? Is it the author actually saying, this is kind of what I think somebody meant to say? You need to be really clear when you're referencing what it is you're talking about. If they're paraphrasing somebody else, what was it that that first person said? Because it may be that actually you want to say, oh, I don't think they've understood that right. So try to get some idea of the answer to those questions before you write out your reference. There's probably three main ways you might want to make a reference. And the first is the most obvious, which is a quotation. Now, this is where you want to take something word for word from another book and put it in your essay. And it's very clear this is somebody else's words, and you need to make that clear in your essay. So either you put it in quotation marks, if it's a relatively small one, or you put it indented from the text, offset from everything else, to clearly separate it out from your work. If you're not quite doing a word-for-word quotation, though, probably what you're doing is a paraphrase. What you're doing is you're saying, this is kind of what this person is saying. And that's something where it comes in the main body of your writing. So you might want to say, well, I was, in this person's work, they're saying this sort of thing. Now, that's not a quotation. It's you putting it in your own words. It's a paraphrase. But just as if it was a quotation, you still need to say, this is where you can find in this person's work where they say this. Because actually, your reader looking at it will want to think, well, I want to find out more about that. Where do I go and look? Or perhaps they might think, I'm not sure they said that. I want to go and check and see that you've got it right. Now, if when you're doing that, you're thinking, I'm going to really struggle to give a page reference for this, that might be a clue that what you're doing is actually a bit more vague than a paraphrase. What you're doing is kind of just making an allusion to something, because that's the third kind of main way that you might be doing this, which is where you're not discussing in any detail. You're not saying they're saying this specific point. You're saying this is an example of somebody who's doing this sort of thing. Or you might say, I kind of agree with these sorts of people who are saying a similar thing to me, or I'm kind of disagreeing with these sorts of people. Or perhaps you wanted to say, you could find out a bit more about this kind of area if you look at these people. You're not saying in any detail what any of them are saying. You're just saying, look, these people are out there, and you might want to go and look at them. Now, in that case, you don't need to give a page reference. You just need to say, this is the person who's writing, this is one or two or a few of their books, and you could go away and look at that if you want to. And it's just helping your reader to get a sense of what other things are out there that you might have read and they might find interesting as well. So that's kind of 3 separate ways that you might do that. So hopefully that's given you some pointers in how you can do referencing. There will be more information that you can find in whatever the style guidelines are that are used by your course. And usually, if you dig far enough into them, you can find the answer to any question that you've got. Thank you.